Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to do my 14.21 support tier list of content. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch, mostly focused around nerfs towards specific supports. We saw nerfs towards Senna, we saw nerfs towards Brand, Tarek, adjustments towards Swain, and then some others which kind of, mostly focused towards other roles, but obviously have an indirect impact on support. The likes of Galio, Hui, Camille, Fitbird Bill, Timo and Malphite got buffed this patch. They are relatively niche supports, you don't really see them that much, but they are worth talking about. The D tier going to consist of relatively similar champions. In fact, MF and Ashe are mainstays here. At this point, they're not really that supported in the role. They do obviously have the unique builds. In Ashe's case, it's just progressively gotten worse over time. Like, the item system just hasn't really benefited her compared to when she was really dominant in 2022. In MF's case, she's always had a player base in the support role, mostly held up by like AP harass option, like item options, but once again, just not really that promising. There are considerably better options which aren't so gated by specific cooldowns. In MF's case, it's obviously her E, that is her main harass tool. The other D tier options are Veigar, who obviously can function here with the cage. That is like the main thing you play around, going a more tanky or movement speed orientated build, and then playing around that is like your main kind of factor here, but once again kind of underperforms. You need a bit more than just the cage to really function within this role, and obviously he does have some damage, but it is very minimal compared to what you'd be getting in like the bot lane role or in the mid lane role. Malphite got buffed this patch. He gained some base HP. Malphite support's a unique one. Like, it on paper, its win rate isn't bad, I don't believe. But obviously it's very gimmicky. You're tending to pair it alongside of the likes of a Yasuo. You don't really see it outside of like very low elo. But on like as a kit, he has good harass. He has good all in. He's obviously going to be squishy if you go the likes of an AP build, but if you're opting into like hybrid or like a primary tank variation, there is still definitely strength to it. I don't think this champion's as bad as the other three options here. Like, I think you can make it work, especially with a mid and low elo. I do think this champion considerably gets weaker the higher up you go. Like, once you get outside of Emerald, people just understand like what the champion does and like how to play around it, whereas in lower down you're more likely to get like these multi-man ultimates, as people won't respect it anywhere near as much. The other two D tier options are Yuumi and Ziggs. In Yuumi's case, she's been bad for a while. Obviously she's very much tied to on-hit marksman or champion, on-hit marksman and crit marksman, very much utilizing the fact that her W healing scales with crit, I believe, or the W damage scales with crit. I can't specifically remember off the top of my head. But yeah, this champion does have some unique pairings which can definitely like amp her up and make her a bit stronger, but definitely struggles more within the climate of the game at the moment. Is just generically kind of weak on power. Was worse when the likes of MF and Jin were meta. She really doesn't synergize well with these champions at all, but some of the other options she can definitely function with. I know Tristana in the past was definitely a stronger pairing, but at the moment, yeah, Yumi's not performing that well. Definitely sits within the D tier. And then Ziggs as a support option, once again a bit more gimmicky. You're pairing it, I believe, just alongside a Veigar, utilizing the W bounce into a cage. He does do damage, obviously there is something there, and you do siege quite well as this option, but if you're not ahead of the curve, then your damage is going to be very minimal. You're really just going to benefit more from like another low econ harass support or just an engaged support, full stop. So yeah, Ziggs does also sit within my D tier at the moment. Swain drops down to the C tier. So Swain got adjusted this patch. He's came out pretty weak. That doesn't really surprise anyone though. The ult cooldown, being able to cycle it every 8 seconds, is just too long. The champion rarely can maintain uptime and fight tempo for that long, either because he dies or the fight finishes by that point. And they stripped a lot of power from him in like regards to giving this space to like thrive. Overall, he's getting buffed next patch, and yeah, he's definitely underperforming at the moment. Sits as a C tier option. The other C tier picks are Maokai, who is also being buffed in 14.22. This champion's really just took a bit of a hit from both, from primarily just jungle Maokai being too strong. They then ended up nerfing support Maokai. Originally it was support Maokai, which was very strong, kind of like Poppy at the moment. They nerfed down support Maokai, tried to promote him as a jungler. Jungle Maokai became very dominant and competitive. They nerfed that. They also nerfed support at the same time. And he's just kind of ended up relatively weak across the board. Obviously, he's very low econ, which is like one of the strengths of the champion. But he's definitely seen better times. He's underperforming quite heavily at the moment. Blitzcrank, also with my seater, he is another pick being buffed in 14.22. They've just stripped a lot of durability and damage away from this champion over time, which has just made him feel quite weak compared to where he has been. And as a champion, obviously his main power just comes from his Q and just how oppressive that can be in lane. But when they've stripped a lot of the other things, which kind of just like gave you the full package of Blitzcrank, this champion has definitely found himself in a pretty unfortunate spot. Other two picks here are Amumu and Renata. In Amumu's case, he doesn't have Even Shroud anymore. That's just what it comes down to. Amumu's support's just been struggling ever since that item got removed from the game, and he does sit within the C tier. He has similar issues to the likes of Galio as a support, which is why I've also dropped Galio down to the B tier, which I'll talk about in a minute. But these champions don't really have great items within the support system for them at the moment. Obviously, Amumu can opt into Zeke, so that can definitely function on him. But Amumu doesn't really want Locket. He doesn't really want Knights. He wants something a bit more offensive, and there just isn't that space for him at the moment. And in Renata's case, she's just been underperforming for a while. For a very unpopular champion, she's been relatively weak. She has been stronger in the past, and a lot of her stronger builds have been opting into more durable kind of variations, like sort of your Lockets, your Redemptions, and just playing around your not so much enchanter aspects, but like your baseline value of a kit and then the strength of the active items. At the moment, though, she does require like synergies to really operate and function within the game. Obviously, the one which comes to mind is Kalista Renata. Kalista, not a great champion for mid and low elo, and Renata's just not really there at the moment. She does sit within my C tier. Teemo probably sits as a high B tier option at the moment. Unironically, Teemo's strong in 3 different roles. I say strong. He's strong top. He's probably borderline overpowered in jungle at the moment. People have started to catch on, which I'm glad. I have been saying that Teemo's been very strong for a while, and I do definitely think this champion requires, just should be getting a bit more recognition. Boxer, fortunately, has been playing a lot of it on stream, and people have definitely been catching on. Teemo support is good. I think that's just what I describe it as. Into lanes where you can really heavily abuse your power with Q combined with your harass, your scaling. There's just actually a lot of power within this pick. Obviously, if you see a team of support, most of the time you're gonna think it's troll, and then some of them are. Like, some of them will just grief the game because it's a pretty common troll pick, unfortunately. But Teemo support, a legitimate pick at the moment, definitely sits towards the high end of the B tier. I reckon he's a close to A tier pick. If you like Teemo and you like support, then he's definitely something which can function here at the moment. Karma, I don't like Karma that much. I think the champion is very restricted in what it can do in terms of it has to be very oppressive early on into the game and then translate that oppressiveness into value with the shielding later on. And although I'd say that's good in maybe high mid and then low high elo, I think the champion's just a bit on the weak side at the moment, which is why I can't really promote it as a good option. But if you're comfortable with the playstyle, knowing that you're like a harass champion early, whether that's like a 5-point Q, a 3-point Q into Emax, and then utilizing your shielding value to really like scale up, well, not so much scale up, but like have value later on into the game, then she can definitely function. I'm not a huge fan of the pick, though. Yeah, she's going to sit within my B tier for the moment. I know a lot of people complain about the likes of Nautilus and Pyke sitting within my B tier, but these champions are very feast or famine, which is weird because obviously they're tanks and they're utility champions at the end of the day. But if you're chain like going in as Nautilus and not finding success, it's where you're going to start finding success later on. Obviously, this champion when ahead can be really oppressive alongside like obviously a very strong marksman. But if you're behind, once again, both these picks can really, really struggle. In Pyke's case, he's a very feast or famine champion, though. Pyke is very oppressive early on to the game, very much utilizing his high AD ratios and lethality to really snowball and get the ball going. If you're going even on Pyke, oftentimes you're just behind and you'll really struggle later on into the game. That is one of the main problems with the pick. But if you're comfortable and you really enjoy playing Pyke, then he can definitely function. And he's definitely a considerably more elite skewed champion. I wouldn't say Nautilus as much, but Nautilus does have some level of elite skew to him. Camille is an elite skewed champion within the support role. Most of the people who play it are either top lane to support, players or just really enjoy the playstyle of Camille support. There are different variations. We've seen like Q Max's, E Max's, Halo Blade variations, and then you're utilizing like your Blood Songs, your Sundered Skies. It's a bit more unique compared to top lane Camille, and with the nerfs this patch, I'd say it probably sits as like a low B tier option. You're not really going to play it if you haven't played it, but if you're comfortable with it and it's something you've definitely put a lot of time into, then should still do the work for you, and it's, yeah, relatively feast or famine. Nico. So Nico sits within my beta still. Obviously, her more common role now, I believe, is support. She does have strengths here in the E being a very long snare duration and just the amount of harass she has within her kit. Combined with her strong ultimate and her W, she does have a lot of tools and she is relatively skillful. Like, if you put a lot of time into Nico support, she can definitely function for you. Is it something I'd really recommend starting on? Probably not. She does sit as more like a mid to low B tier option, but if you enjoy her, then yeah, she can definitely function as a support option. Heimerdinger is almost out of the support role. This pick was stronger in the past, back when he had more of his power loaded into early turrets and like the durability of them. Nowadays, he's more towards it like scaling and getting a lot of AP to really scale up those turrets, make them as more beefy and do as much damage as possible. It just doesn't really feel as support. I mean, he just isn't supported in the support role anymore. That's just the truth of the champion, which is unfortunate because I know some people do enjoy Heimerdinger support, but yeah, the pick's just not doing too hard at the moment. Definitely sits as more like a mid to low beta option. Heimerdinger mid and top are actually good. Like, I do recommend, if you enjoy Heimerdinger, playing him in those two roles. They definitely function quite well at the moment. Pantheon, a mid B tier option. He's like an easier version of Camille, like very like oppressive early, looking to find those angles of like CC, whether that's of obviously Camille E, Pantheon W, and then snowballing that advantage into the later game where you are mostly looking still to be an isolated pick champion. But if you're behind the curve, then you'll really struggle. If you're ahead of the curve, then you can definitely make these picks function. I'd say Pantheon's just a bit easier, and if you enjoy the pick, then yeah, go ahead, play him. Rakan and Thresh are two of my other picks here. Thresh has been garnering some more popularity as of recent. Obviously, Thresh just generically is a pretty popular champion. He's obviously very, very hard to play. A lot of people just don't like seeing Thresh for that reason. But some of the hyper carries, obviously, like the Jinxes and the Aphelioses are like the common ones which come to mind when you think of Thresh, as they tend to be paired with him as they get lots of value out of the Lantern. They can play forward, utilize their high damage, and then have that fallback pattern when they need it. But yeah, the champion tends to be relatively hard to play. If you're not comfortable on Thresh, he's not necessary to pick at the moment. But he does sit as more like a high B tier option. In Rakan's case, he's good. He's a solid option, especially if you play him. Like, he can definitely function within the game. I think he sits as like a high B tier option at the moment. The champion doesn't do enough at the moment, in my opinion. Like, his Q, he'll solid. Like, it can also function obviously as harass, and his engage is very good, but there are a lot of other champions, especially mid and low elo, which can either like harass him, deny his like engage from being as comfortable, and that can definitely punish him. I think Rakan at the moment is pretty elite skewed. Like, if you're comfortable and very good at Rakan, he can definitely find a lot of potential in the current meta. But for the moment, for mid and low elo, I'm going to have him as more of a high B tier option. Once again, as a lot of the champions in this list, if you're comfortable playing Rakan, then he should still definitely do the trick for you. Bard, Seraphine, and Zoe are the remaining B tier options. Honestly, Seraphine probably should have remained as an A tier pick. I think this champion is still like a solid option. I think a lot of the high B tier options are champions which I would consider pretty close to the A tier, like your Bards as well. I think Bard is a pretty close to A tier option. Same goes for Zoe. I think these picks can all function quite well within the game at the moment. Bard obviously tends to be more OTP dependent. If you're very good at Bard, you'll still find a lot of success on the pick. If you're not comfortable playing Bard, you're probably not picking him like whatsoever. He does obviously value the likes of lanes which are pretty self-sufficient, have good shove out, so he can obviously look to roam around the map utilizing his movement speed and portals. But in like certain lane dynamics, it can definitely lose a lot of value, and you'd rather have some sort of either enchanter or just raw engage option. The likes of Samira, like you're not really wanting to pair Bard alongside it, but there can still be aspects of value, especially with Bard's high base damage, enabling Samira to look for those execute angles. In Zoe's case, obviously the main power here comes from her base damage combined with her gold scaling, and less so level scaling. Like Zoe doesn't scale with levels as much as some of the other options. Obviously, it mainly comes down to the base damage. If you're comfortable playing Zoe, you're consistently landing those bubbles, rotating the RQs, which I know a lot of people can struggle with. Obviously, it's a bit unique compared to some of the other picks within the game. And yeah, if you can utilize the summoner spell rotations and play with fight tempo, then she can definitely have value. And then Seraphine dropping back round to this champion, as I managed to get distracted by Bard. She probably should have remained as an A tier pick. She is being nerfed in 14.22, so I'm going to just leave her within the B tier as like a very high B tier option. She does have solid enchanter aspects, and obviously her damage is relatively good. It's not going to be the same as the likes of your Brands, your Zyras, and like your long-range artillery mages, but it is fair. Her ultimate is also a very powerful tool. Her W, very powerful, and she does have solid aspects to her kit. I just think that she has more of a she's a jack of all trades. She does not really specialize in one thing, but she does do a lot of things decently well. Sits as like a low A tier, high B tier option. The A tier event. So Silas, actually, I'm gonna drop Morgana down to the B tier. I don't like Morgana. I think I've made this pretty clear over time. I think this champion's very inconsistent. As a support, her W can feel really lackluster as an ability. Obviously, you do have ways you can build her. Like, you can go down the kind of movement speed Shrelia route, where you're like playing around, just running around the map, playing around queues, and just playing with fight tempo. You can go the Liandry variation if you're looking for damage and you're looking to just be, output more DPS. But then you should probably look at some of the other options. Like, Morgana does do some damage, like it's not like no, like Liandry can definitely have value on her, but yeah, DPS wise, Zyra, Brand, these are the two go-tos I would recommend over her. Other picks moving down actually are Galio and Hui. So Hui got nerfed this patch. They nerfed his E slightly, and they nerfed his QQ damage, and he does drop from the A tier to the B tier. His harass is just going to be a bit less, and he's not going to be able to CC as consistent or as often, which does hurt him a bit, so he does drop down to the B tier. And Galio, as I said with Amumu, he has relatively similar options. It's just not having great item choices at the moment. The likes of Locket can be fine as a first option, but then I know some people just you really do value Hollow Radiance on this pick, primarily in like the other two roles. As a support, I know some people are still building it there. It's not going to have anywhere near as much value, and oftentimes just going to screwing over your ADC, which is unfortunate because it is an item he definitely does want. But Galio, struggles with just the item system in the support role at the moment. Once again, a champion which could have really benefited from Even Shroud being in the game. Galio, gonna be within my B tier. Silas is the champion leader of the A tier. He probably actually sits as more like a mid to high A tier option. Silas just across 3 different roles is doing 3 different roles. Jungle Silas is not great at the moment. I'm gonna be straight with that one. But yeah, top lane, mid lane, support Silas. He's great flexibility. He obviously does want to be played into matchups where you have good ultimates to steal and you can really utilize that effectiveness. But if you're as a standalone, he still does a lot of damage. I know he's been gaining a lot of popularity as a support as a more recently. You do have your bruiser like AP bruiser variants, like your Cosmic Drives, your Proto Belt. You also have just the AP burst variants, like your Storm Surges, your Lich Bane, your Shadow Flames, stuff like that. And both of them do work. You can definitely pick depending on what you need within the game. I think he's actually a really solid A tier option. If you're Joy Silas, he's definitely worth picking. And I still think he'd be worth picking into 14.22, even with the nerfs, mostly focused around his level scaling, so support is going to be the least hit by that. Soraka and Sona sit as low A tier options. They're still good enchanters. They do what you need them to do, but I think some of the S tier enchanters are just slightly above them at the moment, so they can oftentimes feel quite slow to come online. And some of the the thing with these two champions in the past is they used to very much overheal you. They used to do so much more than what they did now, which is where like a lot of their strength came from. Obviously, a lot of that power has been shifted around over time. Moonstone isn't anywhere near as broken of an item as it has been in the past. And these two champions definitely struggle with that, but they can still be very viable in the current climate of the game at the moment. They're just not quite S tier and like high A tier as some of the other options available to you, as these two champions obviously mostly just revolve around their healing, albeit they do have other aspects to their kit. Fiddlesticks got nerfed this patch. He goes from like a mid A tier to like a lower A tier option. Obviously, the Q harass does play a part in support Fiddlesticks. It is something he does value. He does lose a bit of damage. He does drop down slightly. Vel'Koz and Xerath are still both solid artillery options. I still think Xerath is slightly better than Vel'Koz, but when Vel'Koz gets buffed, I think he would probably rise over Xerath as a support option. In mid lane, I'd still take Xerath over Vel'Koz. I think Xerath scales a bit better, and with gold especially, and can definitely function with more artillery, especially with that ultimate, which is very oppressive if consistently landed. LeBlanc, still a good A tier option. Obviously, they've trimmed away a lot of her excess damage, which no longer makes her like an S tier support pick. She was for a while. Like, LeBlanc support was a genuine, really good pick. Obviously, the champion's going to be harder to pilot, but it's kind of alleviated by the fact that you don't need to focus on CSing and you're more focused on just consistently rotating your combos and looking for those isolated 1v1 picks. Even like 2v2s, you can still be valuable. And then roaming around the map, obviously creating like a lot of trouble for the enemy laners to work with. This pick still has great potential as a support, and I do think if you like LeBlanc and you're not as comfortable playing her mid, support is a great functional role for her. Zac is still a good support. His champion obviously has great engage, great base damage, and he can really benefit from being in this role. Milio, another good enchanter. Obviously, being able to cleanse with the ultimate can be really valuable, combined with the shielding and the additional damage he does with his passive. Obviously, it was stronger in the past. It's nowhere near as strong anymore. It's definitely been toned down quite a bit. But he does have, obviously, a bit more base damage as well, with the Q scaling a bit better. That doesn't really play a huge amount into it, but it's definitely something there. And then obviously he's a very abusive interaction with Echoes of Helia, where you can Palmer rotate it with W, which can definitely be where a lot of the strength of this champion is attributed to. Zillion probably should sit at the lower end of the A tier as well. This champion still does what he has done for the last 3 years, or ever since I started playing the game. The utility aspects are still there. He still has good base damage on his Q. Obviously, there's more build variations these days, like tank Zillion wasn't as common back then, but it's definitely something which you can opt into more often now, whether it's like, probably not Grasp anymore, but like your Guardians into like a Warmog Spy. That was something he was doing for a while. That is still something he can do if you're like opting into some more health options, whether it's like your Lockets, your and like going down that route. Obviously, his utility variant is still very powerful, like very strong. It can definitely function quite well within the game. That'll be like your Shurelias and like some of those more CDR tuned items. He still functions as like a good A tier pick, but just probably sits as like, yeah, more like a mid to low A tier option at the moment. Braum is a great answer. Same goes for Senna at the moment. Both these picks I would say are good response picks, good R5 picks in their current state. Can you blind them? Not so much. I'll talk about Senna in a minute, but in Braum's case, very susceptible to enchanters, but great into engage. If you pick Braum into engage, your odds of winning dramatically increase. I really do recommend holding him as a good R5 pick, or just as a response pick. Like, it doesn't, I say R5, like, it won't oftentimes be an R5, it will just be like an R3, where like support got shown on like very early rotation. Moving on then, we have Rel. So Rel and Leona are both still very solid A tier picks. Obviously, they're very strong at Worlds at the moment. They both have great CC tools within their kit. In Rel's case, her engage is obviously some of the best in the game. Being able to like land a crash down combined with the ultimate can be really powerful and swing entire fights. In Leona's case, it's more about her pick potential, but ultimate is a very powerful tool. If you're consistently landing it onto targets without cleanse or QSS, then she can be really potent and definitely can also win games if she consistently lands her rotation. What other picks we got here? We got Shaco, who I still think is a great A-tier option. Like, I really think Shaco support is probably his best role at the moment. The damage he can output with like the AP variations is very impressive. The control over objectives into specific compositions which can't break his boxes easily, primarily like your melee compositions, he can be very impressive in those situations and definitely very deserving of an A-tier spot. I've missed Alistar. Alistar, I believe... Did I not have Alistar last time on my tier list? Whoops. Well, Alistar is still like a B-tier option. Like, the champion's obviously prohibited by the fact that he is a bit lower on the damage side of things, and like if you can't, like, into certain compositions where you can't really functionally engage that well with like your WQ combo, then he can definitely struggle. Silas's popularity also does hurt him, like unstoppable. Like his Alistar's ultimate, that damage reduction is very powerful on Silas, and that does hurt the champion, especially if you're just planing against him. So Alistar can definitely struggle a lot more in those situations. He just says more like a B2 option though at the moment. He can still work, especially if you're very comfortable on the pick. The champions moving down from the S tier to the A tier then are Tarek, who got nerfed this patch. They ended up, it's kind of unfortunate. Obviously, Tarek is a very unpopular champion, but he is strong. There was no doubt about that, especially with fights being more extended. He really benefited from that, more consistently getting the ultimate down, with people just being a bit more durable and doing a bit less damage, combined with obviously the fact that he scales really aggressively with armor, and some of the armor options being quite nice for him at the moment. He was a very solid S tier pick. The nerfs towards his armor ratio does hurt him, and he just dropped from the S tier to the A tier. The other champion which drops down is Brand. Brand obviously was really benefiting from the from just having a lot of inherent base value and being very much able to abuse Leandri's strength. Obviously they've nerfed that, they've toned that down over time, and I'd say he's still a solid dot mage, especially if you're very comfortable on him. But Zyra probably takes the spot as the best one at the moment. She's not been as aggressively nerfed in support, even though obviously she probably shares similar strengths. The like damage she can do with the fights and the control she has with her ultimate are very powerful tools. Brand, obviously a lot of this stems from his strength as a bot laner, his strength as a mid laner, his strength as a jungler in the past. He's obviously not as good there anymore. They've toned that down quite a bit as well. But yeah, support, he finally drops down to the A tier. Will he stay here? Maybe not, we'll see. But for the moment, he's just lost a bit of excess damage. Senna drops down from the S plus to the S tier. I was honestly considering dropping her down to the A tier because she is a bit more conditional now. The armor being taken away from her does make her just inherently worse against ADCs. It also really hurts her against Pyke. Like, you have to ban Pyke as Senna now. This champion really does, like oftentimes it will just be one hook and you will just die, like being that considerably less durable, and already having some of the lowest base health in the game really does hurt Senna. So you do have to be aware of that. But if you do pick Senna in good matchups, she is still one of the best supports you can have access to at the moment. Still a very good S tier pick, but conditionally a bit more now. Can be considered an A tier if you are just blinding the champion. Lulu maintains a spot within the S tier. She still synergizes really well with a lot of the on-hit marksmen, and that is where a lot of her strength comes in, especially with like MF and Jhin being a bit weaker now. She does thrive with some of the other options accessible to her. Shen and Tom, they move up. I really like these two picks. I think they've been really hidden, underrated support options for a while. I've put time into playing Tahm Kench support, but I also play Shen top, and I think these two picks just as like very supportive tanky options which can abuse Heartsteel are both in a very powerful spot at the moment. Obviously Shen's being nerfed next patch, and I'll probably end up moving him down to the A tier, but he's very strong at the moment. In Tahm Kench's case, I think he'll maintain a spot in the S tier until they either nerf Heartsteel or nerf him directly. You do have like two routes you can go. You can go like Heartsteel into more supportive options, or just go the Heartsteel Unending Despair Spirits variation, just acts like a battle tank. This champion can oftentimes be really effective in like those 2v2, 3v3 scenarios where you can really utilize the power of these items. The other 5 picks here. So Lux also moves up to the S tier. She comes up as more of like a really solid artillery mage. She's obviously the most popular support in the game, and she's very powerful. I think Lux as a bot laner and as a mid laner is also very powerful, especially when you give her a bit more gold. If she falls behind the curve, she can definitely struggle a bit more. That is probably where one of her biggest weaknesses lie. She can also struggle into dive oftentimes, so That's another, but at the moment, yeah, she's a great S tier option. The other picks here, we have another two enchanters, and that is Nami and Janna. Both these picks are still very strong at the moment. Nami can really heavily amp up a lot of the marksman at the moment, combined with the CC she has access to, and the E, which is one of the most powerful abilities I think some of the enchanters have access to. Like, being able to slow and do additional damage, very potent, gives her a lot of strength, even though you are W maxing, which is also a very powerful ability. In China's case, her peeling tools are still very oppressive. The E giving bonus AD to some of the marksmen is also very powerful, and a lot of people kind of disregard that strength of Janna. Still very strong. And then the other two picks here, Zyra is my carry option. I think Zyra is dot option. Her damage over time is very oppressive still. Her CC with the E can also be very powerful. And then the plants and the ultimate team fights make her a very strong support option. Obviously, she doesn't have enchanter output, she doesn't have tanky output, which is where she obviously differs from a lot of the remainder of my S tier. But as a DPS option, she is probably the highest on this list. And then Poppy still probably, goes back up to probably being number one support. She is once again being nerfed in 14.22, so she will get weaker. But as an anti-engage option, she's great. She will struggle into enchanters, but she can oftentimes still burst them down, especially if you're consistently landing E into wall and then like rotating Halo Blades with Q. She has incredible base damage, and that really does flourish and show, especially against some of the squishier matchups, where she can really punish them if they are mispositioning, which they often will do in mid and low elo, so that is where some of the strength of champion comes in. There are no S plus picks this patch. I think Poppy does have weaknesses, so I'm not going to have her within the tier. Senna obviously was there last patch, but she got nerfed this patch, so she just dropped down slightly. And those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.